uncertainties like job loss or war or any of the other things that are happening in the world right now that nobody really has the answers, and that creates a lot of fear and uncertainty. So preparing is something that removes those fears and anxieties. And I want to speak to the stigma of homesteading and prepping. And I use air quotes because there's a lot of correlation between the two. A lot of people homesteading are accused of being preppers, and preppers is kind of a bad term or a bad word. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel for those of you that have subscribed, and if you just finding us today, welcome. Today we're out of the barn and out of the pasture, and we're just in the house. It's freezing cold outside, and we wanted to get into some discussion points and help put some people's minds at ease if we could, and just give some people some guidance and tools on what they can do to survive through these unknown times and all the turmoil and stuff that's going on in the world financially, and all the heated hot spots around the globe that, well, let's just say there's a pot of ingredients that match everything that was going on back in the 30s. And all it's going to take is one good stir, and we could end up right back in that position. So today we want to help and give you guys some hope and the tools to be a homesteader no matter where you're at, and learn how to homestead no matter where you're at. Whether you're in the city or you're in an apartment or you're in a home in the city, doesn't matter where you're living. Anybody can live a homesteader lifestyle within the means that they have. Before we get started, I just want to do a little bit of a testimonial. We're very new to YouTube. I've only been doing these videos for about a year, but we have been planning and working towards this homestead lifestyle for about the last 12 years. We were living in the city. It was 2011, and we had a nice house in a nice neighborhood. We had dual income and disposable money, and we wanted to be out of the city on a small piece of land and growing our own food and raising our own animals. So we started looking at what we need to do to achieve that. Sources in our situation, my father-in-law wanted to get out of the city, wanted to live in the country, and we pooled our resources. We pooled our financial resources and went out and bought a piece of land, and we divided the land up, and he built his house and we built our house. And from there, we built the homesteading, and we got into getting chickens and animals and growing our own food and learning how to be self-sustainable. And that was achievable that way. You may have other ways of gaining that, or you may just want to stay in the city and do it at home, which is more than achievable. You may be limited, but at the same time, it can be done, and you can save money and live like a homesteader right in your apartment or in your home in the city. We lived the homestead life, and we enjoyed it. We both worked full-time. We both homesteaded as full-time as we could. Very difficult to do, if I must say. That was literally 2 full-time jobs. And so the pandemic hits some 8 years later, and here we are both sitting, and now my wife works from home, so her job was not as interfered with as mine. I was in the trades, and we saw a lot of job sites shut down, a lot of downtime, a lot of layoffs, and all of a sudden those fears and anxieties started to come back. What do we do? We have X amount of money that we need to put out every month to pay for the mortgage and pay for the water and pay for everything else. How do we do this if we're living on employment insurance or social security or whatever? It can't be done. All right. The math just doesn't work. The government never gives enough to pay for what needs to be paid for. So we sat down with our Excel spreadsheet and we punched in all the numbers as far as our income and all of the stuff that we had to pay out. And we were left with a number at the end. And what we wanted to try and do was increase that number as much as possible. So we went back to our spreadsheet and we started seeing what can we remove or what can we reduce. Those are key things to gaining financial stability. And once we did that and we got into a budget, we stuck with it. And we just started finding ways to whittle away and whittle away. We stopped buying new clothes and started getting secondhand clothes. And we stopped buying new vehicles and started buying vehicles for cash and sitting on them and driving them until they couldn't be driven anymore. I drove the same truck for 11 years, and it was already 10 years old when I bought it. So there are certain ways and sacrifices that people will have to make in order to survive through these inflated times. Pandemic hits, and then all of a sudden we start really thinking about downsizing. So we start looking at the equity in our home and what we can do with that equity, and how and what we can do to remove all of these debts and fears. So we sell our house. And with those proceeds from the house and the equity in the house, we bought within that equity. So now we own the home that we're living in, and we own the property that the home is on. And we've limited our utilities and bills down to a power bill and cell phones and your internet and stuff. Amenities that you could live without, and a lot of people have done, and people did for thousands of years. But we like those things, and we do what we need to do to make that happen. But the bottom line was, now that we've removed the mortgage and removed all the excess debts, now we don't need two incomes. Now we don't need two full-time jobs. And we made some decisions, and because of our situation and being able to work remotely, we were able to scale back to only one of us working and one of us homesteading full-time. Okay, so you've heard our testimonial and how we achieved and got to where we are. And again, that might be different. The path will always be different for everybody else, because everybody else's situations are different. Everybody's resources are different. Even if you have no resources and nobody to reach out to help with this, you can start achieving these things on your own and start to gain some financial freedom and remove those debts and fears and anxieties, and also start preparing for uncertainties like job loss or war or any of the other things that are happening in the world right now that nobody really has the answers, and that creates a lot of fear and uncertainty. So preparing is something that removes those fears and anxieties. And I want to speak to the stigma of homesteading and prepping. And I use air quotes because there's a lot of correlation between the two. A lot of people homesteading are accused of being preppers, and preppers is kind of a bad term or a bad word, because, back in the day, in the 90s and 2000s, there was a lot of shows out there. They put a lot of people on the air that were prepping for different scenarios. We're not out here prepping for anything other than living. Maybe that's what we're preparing for. We're preparing to live our lives free from anybody and anything. Right? And that is what every human being on this planet has a right to do. Every single one of us. Doesn't matter if you're the Pope or you're the guy digging in the ditches. It does not matter. We all belong here. We all deserve to be here, and we all deserve as best a life as we choose to have for ourselves. And that's what we prepare for. And you can call it prepping or whatever you want to do, but at the end of the day, that stigma needs to be removed, because people who choose this lifestyle, choose to homestead, are not preparing for any one scenario necessarily. What they're preparing for is every scenario. Doesn't matter what the case might be. They want to be ready, and they want to make sure that there's food on their tables and shelter over their heads for their children and their families and their loved ones. And so don't buy into that. If I could stress enough, I did it. I thought, no, you know what? I don't want to be accused of being a prepper. I don't want to do these videos because people are going to call me a prepper and they're just going to dismiss me as some kook. I'm not prepping for anything. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm fully aware of what's happening in the world. I keep my finger on the pulse with what's going on. And we try to make sure that no matter what happens in this world, we can continue to feed ourselves and shelter ourselves and keep ourselves warm in the winter and all these things. So don't buy into that. If I can stress enough, don't buy into it. No matter what your friends or your family are saying, how dismissive they may be of this lifestyle, you're not a crazy prepper because you choose to homestead. What you're doing is what people did for thousands and thousands of years before governments formed and societies formed and people started moving into city centers. We homesteaded. We lived, we grew our food, we did animal husbandry and raised our own meats. Like, this is what people have done for thousands of years, and people still choose to do today. And that's all we've done. It's a healthier lifestyle. You feel better physically, mentally, And there's so many benefits to it, and you don't have to be out in the country to do it. I can stress a lot to get out into the country because we need to get back to the woods and the ground, and we have too much concrete under our feet nowadays, and that severs us from our ties to this planet. Yeah, it's important, and you can do that. You can do that in the city. There's parks, there's other places you can go to visit and get out of your box in the city. So don't stress and fret if you're living in town. We did it for years. We started homesteading before we left the city, and it can be done, and you can stay in the city and homestead. So don't get caught up in the stigmas of prepping and homesteading and the correlation that the two have, because yes, there are people out there that are fear mongering right now, and they're putting a lot of additional fear into people by talking about things like financial collapse and world war and all those things. Yeah, we've been faced with those things before. Human beings have survived through those times. And, I always like to go back to the 30s and the Great Depression, and people survived. And we had the luxury of talking to some people who were affected by those times and survived through those times. And they taught us and there's lots of great publications out there by authors who survived those times. And they're writing books about how to homestead and how to survive and growing what foods you need to grow and all that stuff. So, just don't buy into it, folks. Don't buy into the prepping thing. It's homesteading and prepping are the same thing, but it's not a bad thing. It's probably the best thing you could do for yourself and your family and your kids and their futures. And yeah, I won't stress that enough. The food plan, after you've got your budget figured out, your most important thing is going to be your food plan, getting food stores and making sure that no matter what happens with your income or the economy or whatever, you can still put food and water in your body. You might be in a position where you have a front yard or a backyard, or you've got a balcony at your apartment or a community garden. Start taking advantage of those things. Growing your own food was one of the most awesome things I ever did. Growing up, my dad had gardens and he really enjoyed it. And I think I picked up a little bit of that from him. But the bottom line is getting into the dirt and seeing your food grow is so rewarding and healthy. And you know where that food came from. There's no chemicals. There's nothing on there. It's just fresh, clean food out of the dirt. So if you're in a position where you can get a garden started, get one going. Start thinking about foods you like that you want to grow, but also think about foods that sustain. Beans are a good source of protein. Kale is a good source of vitamins and minerals. Think about, if you're in limited space, what you could grow just to offset that little bit. Like everything is expensive at the store now. So no matter what you're growing, you're saving money. You're going to be putting that money back in your pocket because a package of seeds is pennies on the dollar compared to a $12 watermelon. Think about those things. Think about your space. Say you're renting, or and the landlord doesn't want you tearing up the yard. Okay, so go and find your local landscaper and ask if he's got any extra pails for sale. Like these guys, that's what we've done in the past. You can get big 25-gallon, 10-gallon, 5-gallon buckets that are basically planters that they planted something and then the buckets stack up in their yard. So go find them, or just go to the store and buy some planter buckets if you want to. Either way, get some planter buckets and plant your foods in the buckets. Make sure they've got good sun exposure wherever they are. But at the end of the day, you're not tearing up your landlord's turf, and you can still garden that way. And for anybody in the north, we've been bucket gardening for a few years now. We find we can bring our potatoes. We've even brought tomatoes in and had tomatoes into December and January. You can bring them in and they will continue to thrive in that soil, and you can harvest them for a couple of months after the snow has fallen and everything else. So start expanding on how you can bring your own food source into your home. Check with your local municipalities about community gardens. If you are in an apartment complex and you don't have a balcony or a green space where this is available, talk to them. If your community doesn't have one, consider starting one up. Talk to other people in the building, figure out if there's someplace that the apartment complex would allow for some raised garden beds. I see it happening everywhere. And back in the 30s and 40s, the governments actually urged people, they called them victory gardens. They urged people to keep gardens. They urged people to get chickens, which is another thing I'll segue to. Find out if your municipality or if there's any bylaws regarding chickens. If there's no bylaws, get some chickens. We're going to do some great videos on how to get started with chickens. If you have any questions about how getting started, you can set them up on a shoestring budget, like with stuff you've salvaged around the yard or around the city. They are great pets. They got personalities, but they're a great source of protein, whether you want to eat the meat themselves or you just want to eat the eggs. We prefer to just raise egg chickens. We have processed in the past, not really for us. Not a huge meat eater necessarily, but don't want to keep roosters, and your municipality may not allow you to keep roosters, so you may not be able to breed and keep a cycle of chickens going where you can do that. So eat the eggs. You're still getting a great healthy source of protein. If you are gardening, those chickens go hand in hand with the gardens. And when we first started homesteading, we learned that they both go together. In the spring, you throw the chickens in the garden. They'll dig everything up for you, kill off all the little bugs that are coming up into the thawing soil. And get it ready. You scratch it. Not only that, but they deposit tons of what is the best manures you can get for your garden. So consider all those things. Having your own eggs is amazing. I love going out to the coop still 10 years later, or more than 10 years later, and getting fresh eggs and knowing that when I go into the house and I make an egg sandwich, that I've made that bread and the egg has come from my yard and the cheese comes from the goat's cheese and the goat's milk. Like it's so rewarding when you eat something that tastes way better than anything you've ever bought at a restaurant, and knowing that it came from you. You created that. You helped create that. Obviously the chickens did their part and the goats did theirs, whatever. But trust me when I say that it worked towards that. In any way, in any capacity that you can. I have friends that live in apartments. They've got small balconies, may not have the best light. Find a window in the house that has good light. Start growing your own herbs, even simple little herbs. It's just fun to have. If you like peppermint tea, grow some peppermint. And don't go to the store and buy it. Grow it. It's rewarding and healthier for you, and it gets the bug going. Like it gets you going. Like every time we did something and we would want to expand on that. We started with a tiny little garden and then it turned into thousands of square feet of garden by the time we were done. And think about what you need for your house as well. Like if you have the means to put in a huge garden, do it. If you have excess, help out your friends and your neighbors, give away. It feels good. I used to go to work with baskets of eggs and baskets of zucchinis and things we had excess of, and you just can't do anything. So, and that helps people. Everything you can do to remove debt is going to benefit you, and growing your own food is a really good way. We were at a point now where more than 70% of our food is produced, and that reduces your bill at the grocery store by hundreds of dollars a month. So look into it. Any way that you can, look into it. I can't urge that enough. Some of you may not be in a position where you can grow your own food. So you have to start looking at taking advantage of the grocery stores and 50% off deals and bulk buying when things are on sale. These are some of the things we did, and food storage. So you're going to want to invest in some additional freezer storage, and you're going to want to maybe invest in some vacuum seal food storage. This way you can take advantage of deals at the grocery store and not worry about the food going bad later on. You're going to want to look into food preservation. Making pickles is the first thing we did, and one of the easiest things to do. Fermented foods are really good to have around, no matter what your diet plan is. Fermented foods are really good for you. So anyway, good way to get your feet wet with preserving food in the way of pressure canning or water bathing, and vacuum sealing and freezing things. So you go to the store. Around here, they have 50% off aisles, or they have take home tonight deals. Take advantage of those. You go in and your favorite barbecue sauce is on sale. Take advantage of it. Buy 2 or 3. Find some room at the house. Clear out some of the bed sheets and stuff that you don't need 10 sets of. Start downsizing and making room in your house so that you can start putting things more practical in those spaces that you can rely on. As far as, what happens when you're out of income, if you're out of income. Water as well. You're going to want to make sure that you've got enough water stored for yourself and everybody else. I mean, you never know what happens. Power goes out, pumps don't work. You're not getting water to your house. Not necessarily that you're going to be without water for the rest of your life, but it could be a few days. So make sure you've got enough water on hand or stored. We like to can it, and we just have cans of water sitting around. It pressurizes it, could sit on the shelf forever. And if we need it, because the pump's not on or whatever, we can open up a few cans of water. But once you've got your budget figured out, you're going to want to get your food plan figured out. And I'm not saying run out and buy up everything on the shelves, because that's what all this fear and everything is causing. And I'll reference the pandemic again. We always have a store of food, but when we went to the store during the pandemic to get some more things, we noticed the shelves were gone, empty. And right now we're being faced with that again. All over the East Coast and down in the South, there's storms hitting, and all over the place, stores are being cleaned out by panic buying. If you prepare and you buy ahead of time and you buy when things are on budget, you're not stuck waiting in line for a bag of sugar. And you can go home and know that you've got enough to last you a few weeks or whatever. And then the stores will re-up eventually, hopefully. And then you can go back. But we've noticed that every time this happens, when the things do come back to the shelves, everything is costing even more. Case in fact, I just spent $19 on a tub of peanut butter the other day, and I don't live in the middle of nowhere. I'm an hour outside of a major city, and I paid $19 for a tub of peanut butter. That's ridiculous. It's a $7 tub of peanut butter, not even 2 years ago. No reason why these things are inflated, but they are. So don't get caught in that. And the panic buying is something you want to avoid. So start preparing and building up slowly. Think about the staple things that you need. Don't just stock up on Cheetos and Doritos. Those things are going to make you sicker down the road no matter what. So think about things like flour and sugar and baking powder and the things that you can make cakes and cookies and, bread and the, things that you can still enjoy, but, can sustain you. And think about canned goods. If you're not able to set up a pressure canner or a water bather, go to the store and buy canned goods. Everything has an expiry on it. This day and age, everything comes with an expiry date, but a lot of those things won't expire. Canned goods can sit on the shelf for a long time. I'm not going to say how long, because there's guidelines set forth by the United States government that says you can't do this. But bottom line is, things can be stored. You can freeze your butter. You can freeze your milk. You can keep canned goods on the shelf for longer than 4 months or 6 months or whatever the expiry date is. There's even guys on TV that are eating things that are 100 years old, so that were preserved 100 years ago. So case in point. Anyway, I'm digressing. Get your food plan together. Get your water plan together. Figure out how many people you've got in your house and how much you need. If the power goes out for a week or two. I'm now in Canada, but I grew up in South Florida, and we saw hurricanes come through back in the 90s that decimated the power grid. And we were without power, I want to say the better part of 20 days in one point when they had back-to-back storms. No good, folks. Can't get to your ATM machine, can't work the gas pump, can't do any of those things. So when the power's out like that. And like I said, your pumps, your water, certain things will stop coming to the house or to the apartment when power goes out. So be prepared for it. Have some canned goods. Have a little Bunsen burner or something that you can run off of the generator or off of propane, heat up some food, boil some water. If you have the means to put in a wood stove or a fireplace, I prefer wood stove. You can use these as a cooking implement. I can place things on top or inside of that and cook if I need to. So think about things like that. But food plan, okay, very, very number one top priority for everybody. Once you got your budget figured out, figure out what kind of excess income you might have to put towards buying up some bulk things and store up. Not toilet paper. You should have a couple of packages of it, but stay away from bulking up on things that you aren't going to necessarily need. Think about survival, think about prepping, and think about what you're going to need. Your kids are going to need 3 meals a day for however many days you might be without that power. But either way, the power never goes out. That peace of mind removes fear and anxiety that, you get sick or you break your ankle and you can't work for a couple of weeks. You've got food. That's a thing that a lot of people take for granted, and we took for granted. And when I went to the store, when the pandemic hit and I saw those empty shelves, all that panic came back, even though I knew I had all the things I was looking for at home. I had them there. I was just there to re-up. We go into the city every so often, and that's what we do when we go into the city. Yeah. So, if you want to remove those fears, have that peace of mind that you can feed yourself. Because at the very minimum, you could be sitting in the dark and in the cold, bundled up, but you have food in your belly. And that is important, because if you don't have that food in your belly, all kinds of other problems start to come in. So get that food plan together. Well, I've rambled on enough for today. We are going to do a small series and go into helping people work and transition into this lifestyle. I'm a huge advocate of the homesteading or prepping lifestyle. Having all of these preparations in place has helped relieve a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression from me. So I am a huge advocate of pushing that to other people. And if I can even just get one person to make a transition in their life and see the benefits of doing this versus reliance on a system that is failing and broken. These systems have broke before, but we made it through. So keep that in mind. We're going to be okay. No matter what, everybody's going to be okay. But having that peace of mind will allow you to help other people around you understand that it's going to be okay. So thank you for watching. And if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in there. Happy to help. Again, huge advocate, and I want to help push people into this way of life as much as I possibly can so that we can all start to enjoy this thing we call life.